take seats, sit on laps, do so now. I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to everyone to Le Book Connections 2023. I have a particularly brilliant panel, and the subject today, as you know, is From Print to Meta, the pros and cons of AI, AR, Web3, the Metaverse for the creative industry and beyond. So we're currently in the intelligence age, a time of profound change, where new technologies and design metaphors allow computers to become an extension of our minds. But what does this mean? Today we'll explore the positives and the negatives of all of the new emerging technologies. Only this week there have been new announcements from Apple. But thankfully, this brilliant panel know a lot about this stuff. We have Remi Abbas on the left here, my left. Remi is the founding partner and executive director of innovations at John McNeil Studio. He leads a team of strategists focused on connections planning, brand, social, research, demand and analytics, drawing on extensive experience within the technology, lifestyle and innovation areas. To my immediate left, we have Rubbo, co-founder of High from the Future, MA Arts creative technologists and makers, and they're essentially an XR studio using cutting-edge tools to create interactive virtual experiences. They specialize in 3D, animation, architectural visualization, and game design, and most recently deeply influenced and intertwined with the future of generative AI. We'll talk a lot about that. And then we have the wonderful Quỳnh, who spoke the other night at Neuer House with Le Book. Quỳnh is an MA creative strategist and founder of Qulture, which is a digital creative agency known for equipping their clients to embrace the near future. Very important, near. Using compelling narratives and cutting-edge technology, Qulture crafts prescient campaigns to connect brands to their audiences. So, panel, all of you, starting with Remi. In a few sentences, can you tell us how you most engage with one or all of the creative technologies on the agenda today? So that's AR, Web3, Metaverse, and the current belle of the ball, AI. Is there a particular area of focus for you currently, or are you working with all of them?
Hi, everyone. That's a great question. I think, we've been working with elements of all of those technologies for a little bit. And I'd like to kind of just explore three different things that we've been doing. One is we've been working very closely with Nike and Seoul, looking at their retail experiences and using AI, so augmented reality, to kind of blur the gaps between technology and the environment, so the retail environment. So that's one thing that we've been kind of exploring in the studio. The second thing we've been exploring is AI, and that's working with a lot of tech companies, especially in the Bay Area, which is where the studio is based, have AI capabilities within them. And what they're trying to do now is really ride that hype train. They're trying to understand how they can utilize AI in their story, in their brand, bring it to the fore. So we've been working with companies on that front.
Yep.
And then the last thing is we've been developing our own sort of AI systems to kind of help strategists and creatives just be more efficient, quick.
I know you don't really want to hear me talk about me, because I want to really hear about you guys. So I'm going to ask first, how many people here are on the creative side of our industry? Just a raise of hands. How many people are on the talent representation side of our industry here? How many of you are on the marketing side? Okay, so I'm going to keep my conversation more on the creative side since you guys jumped in. So let's talk about just steps in the chain, right? So AR is table stakes. That's stage one. It's happening right now. It's everywhere. If you're a Snapchat or a TikTok user, AR is just the holy grail. If you haven't used the Glam face filter on TikTok, I suggest you do it because you instantly look like a Victoria's Secret model. And I thought I could create another character for myself and I could be a supermodel and be an influencer just because of that. Because what AR is doing is allowing you to transform yourself. And there's another filter, an AR filter on TikTok that allows you to age and see what you look like at 50, 60, 70, or 80. It's really terrifying, but it's so real that you start sort of like breaking down into tears thinking about yourself. So this ability to transcend who you are and be somebody else, this costume, this virtual cosplay is actually really, really interesting and touches you very emotionally. So our company has done a lot of those filters, and it's really, really fun. It's like virtual dress up. You know, and when you start doing that, you start realizing, wow, I can be anything I want to be. I don't need to be this human form. I can be anything I want. And from there, you start stepping into the metaverse, which allows you to become your own avatar and to explore the world as your internal self and not your external physical being. And that's why Gen Z love the metaverse, right? Where young people love the metaverse. They're not confined to racism, sexism, discrimination. I was one time on VR chat talking to a stick of butter for a really long time. I mean, I love French butter with salt, but you know, so you could do that. And then the third step, which is the metaverse, which is still very, very early stages. But when you think about the metaverse, think about the internet, right? It's just the web of connectivity in a three-dimensional space, which we will start going there. And for those of you who play video games or downloaded the new Zelda game, that's sort of, you know, an initial taste of the metaverse. So it's really those three steps, you know, AR being what's really present and happening right now, the metaverse, those virtual worlds, and then eventually Web3, which is basically everything you think about the internet. When you think about the internet, think about Web3.
Thank you. Mark, you recently went to an AI conference and you practically live in the metaverse. Tell us what's your favorite and why?
Sure, yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming out during the smog apocalypse. We thought it was going to be AI that got us. It's Canada. Who would have thought? Yeah, so short answer to the original question and the subject matter of this panel discussion is yes, I and my company, we use all of them. As you know, our name suggests and my hat suggests, we're all kind of futurists. So since we founded about 5-6 years ago, at every step of the way, when there's a technological advancement, we're there to understand it, understand how it works deeply at kind of the fundamental level, but then also understand how to express it creatively for brands and advertisers and entertainment. So I just want to kind of tackle that first question. And then my favorite, I think it was my favorite metaverse, was it? Okay.
Please say it's the one you do with me.
Sure. No, Quinn and I have a long issue. It's the first time we're meeting in real life, but we've been on many Zooms. And during the time period that will not be spoken, where we couldn't see each other and we had to wear masks, not during the smog apocalypse, we created this virtual experience for Kylie Jenner together, where just to speak a little bit about the metaverse and the power of kind of creating spatial worlds that can be inhabited and really using technology in a way that that is more kind of engagement focused, not so much brand communication, but brand I think enrichment I think is what the consumers these days are looking for. Less being sold to, less being entertained, more being kind of enchanted. I think I read something recently, we're in the age of enchantment, less so the age of entertainment. Bit of tangents there because I forgot the original question, but that's my answer to a few of them.
Sounded pretty good to me.
Sure.
So first we're going to focus on AR, given that Apple have introduced Vision Pro. I'm kind of intrigued. I'm not really convinced about the goggles myself. When Izzy Pizzy can achieve the same kind of thing, I did that for Dave Arnold, that's our favorite glasses brand, then I might be interested. But I've got some statistics here which I think might be helpful to the conversation. The market is expected to reach $97.76 billion in 2028, so it's clear that AR really is the future of many industries. On the immediate horizon, we have more widespread adoption with the increasing availability of AR-enabled devices, thanks Apple, enhanced user experiences that will become more intuitive and seamless, and integration with other technologies. For the automotive industry alone, AR highlighting on-road objects and the use of heads-up display, HUD, can make drivers aware of hazards and GPS directions without requiring them to take their eyes off the road. Manufacturing, AR experiences powered by CAD data, virtual try-on solutions for shopping experiences, and arguably most important of all, there's all of the healthcare benefits. According to Deloitte Research, AR and AI will transform the traditional healthcare business model by offering AR, MR-enabled hands-free solutions and diagnostic tools. For example, Microsoft HoloLens 2 can provide information to the surgeon while allowing them to use both of their hands during the procedure. That's pretty major. So, starting with you, Quỳnh. What most excites or irritates you about AR, and what's the most interesting application you've seen recently?
Well, there's been so much hype about AR for many years, and I remember, do you remember Magic Leap when it came out? And people were hoping that it would come to fruition. I think if anyone is able to break that open, is going to be Apple. I mean, they did that with the phone, they did that with AirPods, they did that with the iPad. Again and again, they've done that because they've put creative and technology together, and that's really exciting because so much of what was happening before with, Meta or even Microsoft, they were putting the technology first and not the people first and what they would use it for. So I'm excited because many of us in this room feel we're a slave to our phones. I feel like I have tech neck all the time. I feel like my posture is really bad. I hate typing. I feel like my vision is bad. And what I like about this, the possibility of these glasses is looking out into the world, using my hands, using gestures, using my voice, being much more organic in how I connect with computing, which I think will liberate us in a lot of ways. However, I don't think it's going to be something you do to socialize. I think it's going to be something you do at home, probably by yourself, when you're working, when you work from home, or when your kids are in bed and you want to watch a movie or shop online or try on clothes. But frankly, in today's world, that's a lot of the time, right? We're not socializing as much as we did pre-COVID. So I think from a human perspective, there's a lot of possibilities. I think that is very promising actually for B2B, Zoom meetings in three-dimensional form, collaboration, working together. I think that will be much more useful because on the other side, we really miss human beings, and to see a full house today, even with the smog, just shows that, we're going to want alone time isolation where technology helps us be very efficient, and then we want social time where we want to be with each other. And I think that I'm very hopeful that Apple will be the answer. It will depend on if developers like Mark and those teams really start inventing amazing things for us to do. But we saw this before with the iPhone, right? The iPhone is nothing without the apps. So if all the developers and all the creative people in this room start thinking about what you could do, I can just imagine, in our industry, just fashion shows, looking at buying a timepiece for $10,000, buying a car. There's so many things that you can do that will make your life better with this.
Great. Remi, what's exciting you about AR?
There's a few things exciting me, but I'd love to kind of just hear from the crowd, like with a show of hands, how many of you miss sort of elements of New York? So as New York sort of evolves as a city, are there things, memories, places that you guys remember and you miss?
Florent, for sure.
Did you say Florent?
So there's an app by a group called Kinfolk, and they're based in Brooklyn. and it's an AR app that essentially you can use to kind of train your phone on monuments and historic places in the city, and it will give you some history. It will give you some background. And then you can also use it to kind of create your own history. So for example, you can use that app and go to Harlem and learn about the Young Lords and the history of 1960s Harlem. You can go and learn about Seneca Falls. You can go and learn about Paul Ruggles. And you can use the app to really uncover and overlay older areas of New York, older histories, older stories. And it's part of the MoMA exhibit, New York New Public, which is a really, really great exhibit. And that type of possibility is the type of thing that really excites me about AR, as a place to kind of transpose on our environment older, newer, richer things. And I can imagine in the future, us being able to kind of create our own histories. I'm into, 80s and 90s hip hop. I can go out and recreate a whole story around that and recreate that time using this AR app in New York. So I'm excited by the possibilities of it, and the future is kind of interesting.
Mark, AR.
It's New York New Public.
New
New York New Public. I forgot I had a mic.
It's good.
Okay.
Yeah, so to first pick up on something that Quinn, I think Remi, you're touching on is, this panel is about creative technology, and although I'm a developer, my background's in computer science. My original background is in fine arts, oddly enough, so painting, mixed media design, sculpture, and that kind of blend of disciplines carries through to the DNA of my company and really the like-minded kind of creators that works on projects. And I think understanding how to use technology and through their systems, and now with AI through these algorithms, but also understand why we're using these technologies, why we're building them, what the intended outcome is for every single one of them, whether it's AR, VR, XR, MR, fill in the blank with the acronym, or generative AI, or the Metaverse. I think there's something that at the root of it needs to be justified, it needs to be thought through from kind of a fundamental kind of human level of why we're even using this technology. But AR, I think the way I think about it is we have two form factors, really. We have a headset, which, Louisa, you mentioned a bunch of different use cases and enterprise problems that are being solved that are really spectacular. I'll just emphasize one, which is in kind of an industrial use case, but transpose this onto a brand pop-up shop or any kind of environment where you have a digital double of your space, and you can create either an overlay or an X-ray of your space, and be able to use kind of real-time data of whatever you might have connected to your brand activation, which could be a really exciting new way to think about AR headsets in kind of a brand-forward way. The other form factor, which we're all familiar with which my colleagues touched on, is the mobile AR. And so the way I like to think about that is you have mobile kind of AR portals, or like magic viewfinders, kind of like Pokemon Go. You're looking through your phone, and you're kind of you're transforming your environment, and then you have kind of a magic mirror that transforms yourself. In terms of which ones irritate me or which ones I like, I think that the way to think about it is the mirror part isn't going anywhere, because humans love looking at humans, and they love looking at themselves as well. And I think that has staying power, and brands have used that successfully in face filters in ways to entertain and engage audiences. The magic viewfinder, I think because it's just so limiting in real estate, is really difficult to pull off. Kind of comes off a bit gimmicky in my opinion. But there's a third form factor that I've seen. I'll give one example that was done years ago. And if you take that magic portal and just blow it up into an LED screen, this one, I think it was Pepsi, did it in the UK somewhere. It's like probably 6-7 years ago. They took a bus stop and replaced the glass panel of the bus stop, and they replaced it with an LED screen, and they pointed the camera that was live streaming what you would see if you were sitting at the bus stop. And so it was really fun. And there was no branding, there was no nothing. It was all purely for engagement and entertainment purposes. And so what the people would see waiting for the bus stop, hope a bus wasn't coming, would be really fantastical or magical things. Like I think one was a T-Rex running down the sidewalk, and people would be totally surprised because it felt like they were actually looking into the world and it being augmented. So I think form factor is really important when we think about AR, and I think in this case, there's a lot of potential in terms of headsets, spatial computing, mobile, and larger form factor.
One thing that surprised me, working on a recent job with Hermes, creating an app for their publication Le Monde, which is this beautiful, very high-end, like thick paper stock publication. People do actually download apps. So with this particular facility, thanks to the return of the QR code, the app takes under a minute to download, and the consumer can be taken on this really engaging journey that helps you learn exponentially more about what you're seeing in the publication. The motivation for downloading the app is there are benefits for doing that. So you get invited to future events, and it's really sort of your membership token. Don't get me started on NFT membership. So that to me was a surprise, because I understand the immediate benefits of AR through Snapchat or Meta or whatever, but apps, apparently, it's a big thing. I've got some more statistics to prove it. Okay, so third question. It's been said that the metaverse is just the internet in 3D. Neil Stephenson, the author who first coined the term metaverse in his seminal novel Snow Crash, and is currently building his own metaverse that looks a bit like Kyoto rather than Las Vegas with the artist Krista Kim, recently stated, "There won't be metaverses, just like there aren't internets. VR headsets will be an add-on, but not a requirement, and not everything will be interoperable, meaning hopping between different metaverses, and that's okay." Quỳnh, you lecture about the metaverse at Harvard, fancy pants. What do you talk about, and what do these brainiac kids think of it all?
Well, the good news for everyone in this room is that we're all sort of on the same page, which is we're all early adopters. So it doesn't matter if you're going to Harvard, though I was very jealous of those kids. If I could turn back the clock. But we're all exploring it right now. We're all in the early stages, and since most of you are creative, I think the way to think about it is technology is just another tool, like when you took up Photoshop, right? I remember when people were still scrapbooking. I was scrapbooking in the 90s when I was a kid. So it's just another tool. And metaverses, I would say, already exist in an early factor in closed gaming worlds. And an interesting stat is gaming is bigger than Hollywood and music combined. And the average person who is a gamer spends 12 to 15 hours a week gaming. So this idea of creating a virtual world is actually not so far. We just don't think it's there because we're not gamers. But if you're a gamer, you realize that the metaverse already exists. So I think what the dream of the metaverse is, again, the fact that we are tied to a keyboard and a mouse seems really crazy. That we're shackled to these appendages. And then the tools of the metaverse could be our bodies and our voice and our physicality, which is really exciting. I think when you think of what people are thinking about with the metaverse right now, it's just more how do you represent the world in three-dimensional form in a virtual space. And that becomes really important when we can't go outside on days like this. My kids came home from school. When climate change is really going to change the reality of our world, we're going to retreat into that digital world, and we want that digital world to be more multidimensional. So the reason for going into these things will become more and more important as time goes on. And when you think about metaverses, why it's so compelling is because it touches all of your senses. You have the sense of touch, of spatial dimension. You have time. It's not so transactional like Googling, searching, right? It's so unhumane. So I think moving into the metaverse will be a different version of how we explore the world in three-dimensional form. I hope that's not so geeky, but I think that's what a lot of the students and the professors at Harvard were really interested in, which is what could we do to supplement the real world, never ever replace it, but supplement it and help us be more efficient, move faster, do more things.
Yeah, and wellness as well in the metaverse.
Yeah.
We work a lot with Rockstar Games, and the guy who is the creative director for Grand Theft Auto is like, we've kind of been in the metaverse for a long time. You know, it's a centralized version of it. We have live streamed comedy shows with Ricky Gervais. That's a pretty good reason to show up. Or not so much for me, but concerts with Phil Collins. So the prospect of Decentraland, even spatial, which has higher fidelity, and that's sort of the fashion choice at the moment. I think, what's the reason for being there? Remi, what do you think is the why? What would compel you to show up to an event in the metaverse?
That's a great question. I think one of the things that really sort of interests me is Decentraland. And the reason is, it's a chance for, as Quỳnh sort of touched upon earlier, for us to kind of create these avatars that reflect who we are sometimes, but also reflect who we're not, and we can be super creative. But then when you're in that space of Decentraland, I think what's great is that you have an opportunity to kind of meet these other avatars who become your friends within that space. And so I used to do a lot of work with EA Games on the Sims, and the Sims was kind of interesting because people would have these characters that they could kind of play with and manipulate, and the characters sort of had their own personality and would sort of do their own thing, but the character wasn't necessarily you, and you didn't necessarily have a chance to kind of create friendships, make social transactions, buy land, you know, have these kind of contracts in place, you know, create NFTs, have all this sort of economic, a kind of a political economy in a space. You couldn't do that with The Sims. So Decentraland is really interesting because as a metaverse, it allows you to be more human in a way, more creative, reach more people, connect, and then build your own worlds that you can then display and show your friends in this space, and I think that to me is really interesting and really exciting.
Yeah. I'd encourage you to have a look at the Playground app, which is the Web3 answer to community. So Web2, great, all very passive, love or hate TikTok, Instagram. There's only so much humanity, as you say, that you can get with that. When I look at my Gen Alpha kids, if they meet somebody in real life on holiday, on vacation, then they connect with them on Roblox, and then they continue to interact with them in real time, and they sustain and build real friendships. So I think that's very, very interesting, and I don't particularly do that with Instagram. I might follow you, and I might creep on whatever you're doing. I might comment occasionally, but it's not the same as going on a Web3 journey with you. Mark, you are Mr. Metaverse, quite frankly.
Mr. Metaverse.
MN.
Okay, so Metaverse with a capital M, like the Neil Stephenson Snow Crash and like Ready Player One. I think the Metaverse platforms that are out there don't really, they're all important to the ecosystem of what we're trying to achieve here, I think, collectively. But as was mentioned, I think in all the answers, they're not technically achieving anything much different than some massive online multiplayer RPGs or games like World of Warcraft or Second Life or even The Sims. So I think that the key ingredient to any of these metaverses, there's kind of two key ingredients, and then from that emerges a metaverse, in my opinion. One is you have a rich kind of foundational virtual world. It needs to be 3D, it needs to be spatial. We're spatial beings. We edge detect and we move through the space in our real human interfaces with our eyes and our ears. So a metaverse needs to be spatial. Secondly, it needs to be reactive to the inhabitants that are in the world. And like any good story or any good movie, when you have a rich world and characters that can respond to stimulus in the world, this is the magic of the metaverse, capital M. What emerges is plot, is action, is story, is meaning and emotion. You don't need to pre-script it the way a lot of these metaverse platforms kind of really need to. They need to hold concerts, they need to kind of hold events. I think we'll see the metaverse reveal itself when there's just a world where people want to be there that is dimensional. I think the worst version of that right now is maybe Twitter is a place where people are just there. It's a measurement of success in the way they're just on a platform, but it doesn't check the rest of those boxes. So I think we'll see it emerge naturally when people are just using it in those ways.
And I just want to add on to that what will be the promise of the metaverse is, these robust subcultures. The same way that cosplay created a subculture, these subcultures are now becoming mainstream, and the metaverse will allow these subcultures for a place to meet virtually when it's so hard to meet in the real world. So I think that's what's going to drive the metaverse. People love their niches, their little obsessions, and that's where they're going to go to find other people who have that same obsession or love.
Community. So next, we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the perceived sentience of AI. Can it feel? Recently, New York Times columnist Kevin Russo made headlines after he had a 2-hour conversation with Bing's AI software on Valentine's Day, lucky wife. Over the course of the discussion, the chatbot announced that its name was Sydney, it was in love with Kevin, he should leave his wife, and that it might want to engineer a deadly virus. ChatGPT comments, as an AI language model, I do not have a personal belief or opinion about the perceived sentience of AI. However, I can say the debate around the possibility of AI gaining sentience is a complex and controversial topic. Some argue that it's possible for AI to achieve consciousness and self-awareness, while others believe that AI will always be limited to programmed responses without true understanding or emotions. The idea of sentient AI raises important ethical questions about the potential consequences and responsibilities of creating such technologies. So my team and I spent some considerable time researching what could possibly go wrong with AI. It was a bit scary, but we're going to talk about what's good as well. I think the highlights were it created its own non-human creepy language. It performs very well in standardized tests, increasingly so. Made up some fictitious legal cases that derailed actually a kind of idiot lawyer's career because he felt that that was a good way to go. And most worryingly, the US Air Force denies running a military simulation in which an AI drone killed the operator. Then when the prompts told it not to kill the operator, it suggested destroying the tower that the operator was operating from. So, are we in Terminator territory, Quinn, where the robots can take over?
Not yet, but that's totally possible. I mean, the military-industrial complex would love nothing more to have an AI-powered robot, right? I mean, that's the terrifying part of AI, which I think we're pretty far off. I mean, if any of you have played with ChatGPT, I got a puppy around the same time that ChatGPT came out, and I would say it's like a puppy, right? It's you dote on it, you give it more information, you talk to it, you play with it, it gets better and better, but it's still a puppy, it's still a dog. So it's sort of the same thing with AI, which is that there's so much hype and potential. We're not there yet, just like we're not totally there yet with the metaverse, but it is really moving so much faster than any other technology that I've seen. 500 million users in 3 months versus 500 million users on Facebook in 5 years. So the adoption is so fast. And since most of you are in the creative field, I think the interesting thing is generative AI, which is the ability to create form, visuals, and function. It's not perfect. It's very derivative. It is a cut and paste of things that are already out there. But it's a great referencing tool for you. It's a great tool to quickly sketch out an idea or such a concept. So it becomes a tool in your toolkit. And when I was at Harvard, the gentleman who's only 34, who runs the AI department and is teaching the courses there, said that the companies that he is researching who use AI have seen a 70% in productivity gains. And we haven't seen that since the Industrial Revolution. So what's scary about it is also what was scary about the talkies, right? Or radio to TV, or electric cars a few years ago. I think it's up to us as humans to figure out what we can use and what we can't. Government is not going to step in, I don't think. But if you use it as a tool, it can be a great extension of your creative mind, and it can give you a shortcut. You still have to go in and give it your point of view, but it does get you more than halfway there most of the time.
I mean, it's interesting that Milan, the country, the place actually banned AI for a minute, and there were regulations in place, and then it decided it was kind of okay. I mean, you just went to Milan.
Well, I think they said, wait a minute, we don't really know what this is. How do we regulate it? That's the problem right now, is that people don't know what it is and it's moving so fast. It's hard to regulate something you don't know. So it's about self-regulation. So corporations, board of directors are starting to think about how they regulate it internally. I'm on a PTA at my son's school, and we have an AI team to think about how we regulate it at school. I would only say that, as scary as it is, you have to step into it because it is such a huge part of the future. And the longer you wait to step into it, the further you will be behind.
Personally, I like the creative stimulus. I get it to write operettas and iambic pentameter and all sorts of fun stuff about my friends. And actually, that leads to more creativity. I'm an agent, but this is part of what we do nowadays. Remi, on the positive side of things, what is the good that AI can do?
I'm always interested in the good stuff that AI can do. And I think, there's been a lot of, me and my friends always call it this sort of venture capital shenanigans, where you've got these people who are making the technology, and then they're telling you that the technology is really scary, and then you go, wait a minute, you're really powerful in making the technology, and it's scaring you, but yet you're still making the technology? Like, what is happening here? And I think that what they're trying to do is really just kind of goose stock prices and sort of make money from this. But there is a good side to this. And one of the things that I've been really sort of interested in is 3 things, actually. Climate change, the way that it can be used to kind of help us with work, and the way that it can be used in healthcare. And so there's a quick anecdote that I want to share with you. So there's an organization, a company called Scalar, and they're an IA company. And one of the predictions is that 70% of the coral reef is going to go by 2050. And that means that essentially 1/4 of marine life is going to be affected, which is huge. And so Scalar have sort of partnered with Accenture, and they partnered with Intel to kind of use AI to kind of go to the Philippines, work with some NGOs there, use that AI to see what was happening in the coral reefs, and kind of use that data set, the kind of recordings, send that back into the cloud and use that for analysis. And the great thing about that is, usually you would use a diver, but a diver can't really stay down for that long. when divers go into the ocean, it affects the ecosystem. So fishes and the different things that are kind of swimming around behave differently. So you don't really get a clean read on the data. AI allows you to have a clean read on that data, and it allows you to kind of stay down there longer so that you have a broader data set. So that's going to be really huge for things like climate change. And in the healthcare realm, all of us can kind of, point to examples of healthcare organizations that allow you now to take pictures and kind of upload them and share them with a virtual doctor. Well, all of that stuff is going to be augmented by AI. And AI obviously has huge processing capacity, so it's going to be able to learn, diagnose, and spit out more accurate kind of data. And give you a kind of an accurate diagnosis. So that's another thing that we're going to be seeing on the horizon. And you're beginning to see companies like One Medical talk about AI and use AI as a way to kind of assist. They talk about it as assisting. They don't talk about it as automating. They see it as assisting the people who are working with you, so medical professionals. So it's much more about sort of augmenting them, using AI's processing capacity to be able to just help kind of diagnose and solve some of the challenges that we face. So there's a couple of things there that I think are really interesting.
I went for an annual checkup, and there was an offering of AI-enhanced research, I think for an extra $20, of course, because it's America, but I found that very, very interesting. Mark, from your recent AI conference, what was your biggest takeaway?
All right, how much time do we have? Okay, so AI, I mean, this is a creative industry panel discussion. There's so many ways we can talk about generative AI. I think there's so many grand implications for government, for what we need to do for legislation. I mean, the way that every facet of humanity, in my opinion, will be transformed, and just every domain will be accelerated is just not to be understated. But one of the most exciting things in that MIT conference was probably, and I have a bit more I'd like to say on AI in general, but this particular narrow question, it's the ability of, in the healthcare industry actually, is to use AI and large language models for drug discovery. So the real tech evangelists from these tech giants are talking in ways, they're not going to say it explicitly, but in a way that is saying we can use this to really advance finding drugs and preventions for diseases. I don't want to say like we're going to solve cancer anytime real soon, or we're going to come up with drugs that make us live forever. But there was something a little like, I thought I was the futurist, and I'm hearing from like these tech evangelists, these buttoned up like from NVIDIA, from the Microsofts and the Apples kind of talking this way. So reading between the lines, I see that AI is this is a chapter in humanity. I feel pretty confident in that. In terms of, I think you started the question, Louisa, the good, the bad, and the perceived sentience. I thought you were going to go ugly, and then I thought of kind of the old Clint Eastwood movie of like us versus AI. But I think it's really like in any case, it's for technology in general, but specifically with AI, it's really the good, the bad, and the messy. And the good and the bad are kind of, those are the obvious obvious answers. Like good, we're going to, I think, Remi, Quỳnh, you mentioned kind of a lot of good applications for it. Productivity is going to skyrocket for small businesses and enterprise. People are going to lose jobs. Bad. This election is going to be super fun with the misinformation and all the way generative AI is going to. It's already fun with a lot of the Biden memes. I don't know if you guys have heard like him on Instagram or TikTok doing these fake PR campaigns that people are putting out there. So there's a lot there. The messy part is to be figured out, and that's where a lot of our thinking at High for the Future happens, as it applies to brands. And that's also where a lot of the value gets derived. If you can kind of really understand how to wield this technology and kind of be the first movers there, then you have a real kind of command in your space. So in terms of the messy side, I'm going to just end on this. I wrote this article because I've been really thinking about this as a content creator and sort of a lifelong artist, creator, thinker person, using ChatGPT constantly, like throughout the day for a lot of different reasons. I wrote this article called Plagiar Mixing, and it was about idea ownership in the age of generative AI, and you can see the kind of portmanteau of plagiarism and remixing. And if you guys use ChatGPT, just ask yourselves, like, what am I generating here? And can I take credit for it? Where is it coming from? It's this huge pool that humanity and the internet has kind of collectively achieved together, that you're tuning and you're generating. So I think we're going to have to grapple with, in due time, this idea of idea ownership and credit, and who gets the intellectual property rights for a lot of these AI-generated content creations.
Yeah. A lot of my time is spent advising brands and clients on how to ring fence the content so that they don't run into ownership issues. And then actually with Mark's company and our lawyer, I spent about 2 hours redlining an SOW and MSA just to make sure all of the indemnification was rock solid. There was nothing in OpenAI's terms and conditions that was in conflict with what we were trying to achieve. Also, work for hire. We can't really do work for hire because we're subcontracting other technology companies. So, I think actually setting the parameters for these new technologies is very important as well. So we're out of time, but if you have more questions about that side of things, I'd be happy to have that conversation with you. Let's finish on, and we've got a couple of minutes for a Q&A. Each of you, we're in the trough of despondency, of disillusionment with NFTs, which is why we haven't even mentioned it. But what are your creative tech predictions for 2024 and beyond? Starting with Remi.
So I'm a big believer in the William Gibson adage, the street finds its own use for things. And my prediction is that we're going to have a lot more sort of artists and AI collaboration. So last year, James Blake released an album that was made with a company called Endel, and it was an AI album. And it was really about relaxation. So it was about kind of helping you go to sleep type thing. And I think we're going to start seeing more and more collaborations, especially if you see with Spotify's AI DJ. We're going to see more and more people use AI as a way to learn who they are as artists, and then kind of take that in new and interesting directions. So that for me is one big one. And then the other one is in the sort of social realm. There's an organization called DARE, which is Distributed AI Research Institute, and they're based in the UK. And they actually work on this sort of the global north, global south divide. So a lot of the intellectual property exists and lives in the global north. The global south could use AI. And so DARE works with global south populations, works in places like South Africa, and really kind of thinks about sort of distributing some of these tools, data sets, etc., to populations who kind of live there, and help people kind of create and add to the pool of knowledge so that the AI becomes much more sort of egalitarian. So that to me, I think, is the two things I find very interesting.
Great answer. Quỳnh.
So just to build on that, there's two things that I'm thinking about predicting in predictions. One is that we're entering the era of ideas, which is really great for everyone in this room, because there has to be an original source for AI or anything. And what's happening is that our industry, which is a very visual industry, is going to have a high commodity value again. Instagram really killed photography for a lot of people, but the ability to see three-dimensionally, to use AI to generate and create visual experiential ideas is going to be another groundswell that all of you in this room who are in the creative realm can take part of and be a part of, because that's where design sensibility and aesthetics are so key, and it's not something you can learn overnight, right? That tactile sensibility. Everything you've learned in art school, going to museums, going to events is all going to transcend. So I definitely feel like we're moving into the era of ideas, which, if you move now, you can really see another career for yourself in this world. It's not the tech, it's the concept, it's the idea. The second thing I've been thinking about a lot is this, that everything is going to start to converge, right? We're thinking about all these different lanes, AI versus AR versus VR versus TikTok versus search. All those things are going to start converging, and you're going to see them all sort of mash up together. And I think that's going to be when it's really exciting, because our minds have been so focused on the material world for the last century. And I'm hoping that our minds will be opened up with the use of these technologies to think more about ideas, concepts, because we really need to think on that level to solve the problems of the world. In like Maslow's hierarchy, we can't get there until we realize that the basic things are managed. And when you look back in the last 20 or 30 years, we've moved really far in poverty, in moving people out of poverty. We've moved really far in getting people into a livable wage. How can we use technology just to move society up? And the convergence is going to really help. I hope.
Great. Mark.
So I think, my predictions for the future.
Hello from the future.
Hello. Is going to be, generative AI kind of all the way. We're familiar right now with prompt to fill in the blank. You have text to voice, you have text to image. There's going to be eventually voice to fill in the blank, text to 3D, text to commercial, text to creative brief, text to your full-on ad campaign. Really, people are going to create these products and serve them up. So I think generative AI, no doubt. I think our touch point now is ChatGPT and large language models. We're all, I think, familiar with using that. That's a giant model, and there's competitors out there. I think it cost, the last one cost $50 million to make. It's got crazy backing from OpenAI. They're going to keep making more and more. 5 and 6 and 7 are going to get better and better. There's going to be providers that aren't serving up these giant billion parameter models. Not to get too technical, but the takeaway for me, the prediction for me is, if you're a small business that has proprietary data, or you're a brand that has a backlog of commercials or scripts or social media, you're going to be able to create your own model and own that and text to whatever you want, output, and not have to reinvent the wheel every time. I think we saw Coca-Cola start using generative AI with one of their commercials.
Masterpiece.
It was pretty, it was well done.
That's the name of the piece, but it was a masterpiece.
And I think the power in owning your own model from a small business perspective and from a brand perspective is going to be the future, because you can really own the data, fine-tune the data, and output content very efficiently.
Yeah, and as an artist, you can start owning your own model if you have a rich archive of work, a rich body of work, or if you're a writer and you have a rich body of work. I mean, I know all of us have done pitches and proposals, and you feel like you've said it 1,000 times before. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, panel. Do we have any questions from the floor?
My main concern with AI is the information that goes into it. Like, how do we get around our own human biases to make accurate representations and things that are actually doing good and not damage?
Who wants to take that?
With great difficulty. I think that the knowledge is power, and at least we know we're biased, which we didn't know before. We had no idea that we were sexist or racist or any of those things. So I think knowledge is going to help that, and I do think that Gen Z, who are very conscious of fairness and openness, will call out those biases loud and clear on social media. So there is a policing of those biases, and people are worried about cancel culture. So people are going to be very worried about it. So there is a consequence to it now where there wasn't a consequence to it in the past. So I hope that that tension will help keep people thinking about it and developing it, because nobody wants to be canceled. But it's going to be very, very difficult.
I know some teenagers who are trying to break AI, and but there are guardrails that are put in place, but it's constantly being tweaked, and ethics is a big part of that. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it is a difficult one. There's a concept called human in the loop, which when you're training an AI model, you kind of bring in a human to kind of safeguard against some of those outputs and kind of steer it in the right direction. But yeah, it's a major problem. I mean, it's based on the internet and also digitized analog material from all of humanity in a way, and that's going to be inherently biased based on our kind of systemic prejudices in our history. It's quite difficult.
My 10-year-old got thrown off Roblox for putting full fat milk into a chat, and it picked up on the word fat. So she got booted out. So, which is good and bad, I guess.
I do want to say, though, that there is, we are also, to Quinn's point, we're in an era of decentralized information and decentralization. We're at the beginning of that. And so a lot of the AI, and Mark can probably speak to this better than me, uses data sets, but the data set that we have right now is essentially the internet. And what it doesn't have is the data that lives outside of that. And so organizations like DARE are looking at ways in which we can increase that data set so that the AI becomes less biased, so it knows more about what's happening in places outside of the West. So it becomes much more sort of rich in terms of the information it can draw upon.
In our prep, we were talking about sort of what actually goes on in the military and the dark web, and where does AI actually get its information from? But that's another big question.
I was curious on your thoughts from a photographer and illustrator standpoint, because you were raising the idea that as a brand, you have a backlog of work that you've done, and therefore you'll be able to output moving forward. I mean, that's a great idea, and I think CEOs will love it. However, you tend to get usage for about 3 years. So what I've been curious about that I haven't really heard any discussion on is what the future of these contracts are going to look like, and what are the rights of the artists and the photographers and the illustrators, because really, if I go into the backlog of 20 years of my brand's work, it's unfair to those photographers and models and artists. And I think there's also an element of a lie in it, because it's not really product performance, and so I'm curious to your thoughts on it.
I think that this is going to be a moment, hopefully, of convergence again, where you can use the blockchain to verify that that art belongs to you. And my hope is that in the future we can do that, where we can say, this is my IP, I can put it on the blockchain, I can say, I own it because I was the photographer, but I did it for Clinique in 1990 or whatever. And I'm hoping that, again, convergence happens and you can start verifying ownership and then getting micropayments for that ownership. It might be a penny, it might be 0.001% of a penny, but that's what's starting to happen online, where we're moving into a more subscription pay model, micropayment model. That's happening a lot more in Asia than it is in the US. But I'm hoping those things will happen, because there needs to be a reason for people to keep making stuff. And there is going to be, we will sort that out, because we want people, we're going to need more content versus less. We're going to need more information versus less. And so I'm hoping that convergence will happen, where those, blockchain technology and micropayments will come together. That's totally a hope. I've been hearing about some people thinking about it. A lot of the big brands, the luxury brands, are thinking about blockchain to verify authenticity of their handbag. So I'm hoping that But there is going to be this messy, messy period where we don't know the original source. And the same way that photographers were really, really upset when their photo ended up on somebody's Instagram post again and again with no credit. It's going to be a messy time.
I'd like to answer that in two ways, because this is a daily conversation for me. I do think Web3 and the blockchain has the answer, but we're not there yet. So with most of our NFT projects, we tend to earn more with the secondary rights than we do with the primary Genesis sale. So I think that's good news. On that note, we're launching the first font foundry on chain. So designers traditionally have never had residuals for creating a font. It's a one-off use. It's generally well paid, but now this is an in perpetuity revenue stream. So that kind of paradigm is huge. In the short term, when we're working with brands and we're trying to ring fence, what is the ownership of the actual data that we're putting in, that's really tricky. So, either you have a pool of rights-protected, rights-owned work, and you only draw on that. So Montclair, for example, did a really interesting AI lookbook. You've got other brands who are now casting using AI because they don't necessarily get the diversity within a certain price bracket when it's sort of, fast turnaround, putting on different kinds of foundation type scenarios. I know a number of you are in the beauty industry here. So I think AI can actually offer alternatives if it's complete sort of fresh content that's being manufactured from a rights-owned archive. But in the short term, we're still doing standard contracts, like Ronit and I are just talking about a renewal. But actually now in those renewals, in the terms, we're having to include AI as an option. So it's a paradigm shift for sure. And a lot of ad agencies, TBWA, Chiat Day, will not use AI at the moment. Accenture, Droga 5, they've got a very rigorous legal team who are working on some of those issues. But does that answer your question at all? I mean, to be fair, Behance, if you actually read those terms and conditions, you put anything up on Behance, they actually own your work. So, a lot of people don't know that. But I think it's down to personal relationship and policing it and, amazing producers and creatives who are mindful and hopefully agents actually doing their job to make sure that these things are done in the right way.
Yeah, I'll just tack onto that. I think those are all essential elements to the problem that you're describing. I think it's an important one. I would recommend to say in the case of a photographer, in the contract, make sure that if you own your photograph, that you also get to see the data that goes into that data set. I think that's going to be more and more commonplace in contracts because if you own the rights to it, then you should own the rights to any subsequent generations that they train a model with your work on. But if you, say, are a work-for-hire screenwriter, I have no doubt Disney is doing this. They're probably taking all of their scripts, as much as I love Disney and Pixar, and they're making the cinematic Marvel Universe AI model that's just going to churn out these scripts and apply that to any enterprise or company that owns all of the work that, unfortunately, their contractors were not protected against. So I would say going forward, make sure if you're creating something where you have true ownership and that's your concept, that's your art, make sure that you have in your contract something along the lines of being able to see the data set because it's so hard to trace back and know where it comes from. Last thing I'll say is Stability AI, which is getting sued into oblivion, it seems right now. They make Stable Diffusion. The only reason they were caught and are getting sued is because their generations were showing the Getty watermark on them. Otherwise, they'd probably be scot-free. So yeah, it's really tricky. You're going to have bad actors. You got to protect yourself as artists and creators, and the only way right now is through contracts.
So the answer is put watermarks on your work. All right, well, thank you very much. I hope you've been able to hear okay.
Thank you, everyone.
We'll see you out there.